Shavua Tov, everybody. Hopefully, everybody's having a blessed start to the week thus far. And welcome to another video where we're going to discuss the infamous Isaiah 7:14 prophecy, which many Christians wonder in astonishment, why is it that the Jews don't believe in the Gospels, in the New Testament, the message, the good news, as they call it, of Yeshu, Jesus, being the promised Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, as they often claim, especially Messianic Jews today. Well, if you wanted to get an understanding from the Jewish perspective, especially Orthodox Jews, God-fearing, Torah observant Jews, as to why that is indeed the case, then starting with the first book of the supposed Gospels, Matthew chapter 1, uh, you can pretty much get your answer as to why the Jewish people pretty much reject and want really nothing to do with the uh, alleged good news that Christianity tries to impose on us and the rest of the world. And basically, if you look at Matthew 1, especially verses 22 and 23, but especially well, let's take a look at both of them, right? So if you look over here, verse 22, Matthew has just completed telling us in verses 17 through 21 about the virgin birth of Jesus. Jesus was born through a virgin birth in order to fulfill what was stated by the Lord, through his prophet Isaiah, apparently, which he is trying to present as messianic proof, a messianic proof text fulfilled in Jesus. So so that there's no doubt, right? Here's all the different versions, Bible.hub. Type in Matthew 1:22, you get all the different readings, different versions and translations. But basically, right, the King James Version, the top most popular, Christian translation out there, for centuries, pretty much. Now, all this was done, meaning the virgin birth story that he just told, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying. So here's the link, and what he's trying to tell us is that basically what I just told you about Jesus being born from a virgin birth, this is what was spoken of by the Lord through his prophet, meaning the God of Israel spoke about this. It is clearly stated in the Hebrew text, the Hebrew prophets, the prophet Isaiah, which he then proceeds to apparently try to quote. And then that's how we get to now verse 23. And once again, let's look at it. And here's the King James Bible. Behold, and they shall call his name Immanuel, which being interpreted is God with us. All right. So this is what the Christian Bible, the Christian faith hinges on. All right. They put all their cards on this virgin birth story, which doesn't appear anywhere else. All right. But Luke and Matthew. Nowhere else is it brought. Not by John, not by Mark, not by Paul's letters. Nowhere else in the New Testament is this story brought. Nor is it stated in any way, shape, or form that it must be believed in order to be a true follower of Jesus in any way, shape, or form. I mean, there's no requirement anywhere else in the New Testament that this is like a creed that must be accepted by the followers of Jesus going forward, etc. So it's very strange, very odd that Matthew, right, the first book, the first chapter, starts off with the story of a virgin birth and then proceeds to claim that it is actually fulfillment of messianic prophecy uh, based on Isaiah 7:14. And he tells us what Isaiah 7:14 says. But the huge problem is, and now pay attention, this is extremely, extremely important. When we look at the Hebrew text, again, which Matthew claims, okay, is the source for his virgin birth narrative and the proof text, right? Fulfillment, messianic fulfillment in the Hebrew scriptures, in the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew prophet Isaiah. Let's go and take a look at what Isaiah actually says. I'm using the Chabad.org text files here. Anybody can log in and check for themselves. Take the look at the link over there, and you can find it. Basically, anybody that needs a good English translation I'm familiar with the Hebrew. I'm fluent in it. So no problems for me there. For most Orthodox Jews, this is not an issue. We understand it. We learned our Hebrew text, have preserved them and learned them for thousands of years now. So we're pretty good at it. And basically here it is, but for the sake of those that need a, not Hebrew is not their strength, or just need a good translation of the Hebrew, the Chabad website is usually pretty good. One of the best English translations out there. And again, let's take a look at it. So it says, "Lachen yitin Adonai ulachem ot, ine ha'alma hara veyoledet ben vekarat shmo Immanuel." So the English, "Therefore the Lord of his own shall give you a sign. Behold, the young woman is with child, is with child, and she shall bear a son, and she shall call his name Emmanuel." So already we see major, major, major problems. The Hebrew text, the Hebrew Isaiah, the word of God, the word of the prophet Isaiah, as he received it and was commanded to speak in the name of God to King Ahaz, terrible, terrible, terrible king, wicked, godless, immoral, wicked king at the time, uh, leading the house of Judah at the time, who was about to get utterly destroyed by two kings who were plotting to destroy the kingdom of Judah at the time and were pretty much encircling them and about to just completely wipe them out. They were in dire straits and in need of a major miracle, a major intervention by God, or else, within the next few months, they're just done. And here comes the prophet Isaiah and tells them not to worry. God is going to give you a sign. Here is the sign of his protection, of the salvation that the God of Israel will provide for you, King Ahaz, and the house of Judah, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim at the time. Here's what the Lord God of Israel will do for you. Ine ha'alma, behold, the young woman, okay, not ha-betula, okay, first ha is the definite article in Hebrew, the hey, the letter hey is right here, this letter hey, right, ha, and then the word alma, ha, that's like the English equivalent of it's definite article. It implies it's someone who is known, okay, ha alma, the young woman, which you guys know, Isaiah is basically trying to say to King Ahaz and the crowd that is there, who's addressing, who's being addressed by the prophet Isaiah, who's carrying the message of the Lord to them. The young woman, Hara, she is with child. Okay, Hara is past present. Okay, Hara means she is with child or has conceived. She is pregnant. Okay, the young woman who is pregnant, who has conceived, Veyoledet ben, she will give birth to a son, Vekarat shmo Immanuel, and she will call his name Emmanuel. Okay, so huge, huge difference. The King James Version, as we saw here, let's go back to it. What do? They just completely butchered this text in so many ways. Behold a virgin. So they changed the definite article. In Hebrew, it's the young woman. Here they put a virgin. Okay, a to denote someone who is what's the difference here? The difference is that the virgin or the young woman versus a virgin, a young woman. It could imply anyone. It's someone who is unknown, someone who could just be, just anybody, right? Whereas the prophet Isaiah is telling us, the young woman, okay? It's someone who is known, someone who is contemporary and alive at the time that Isaiah is speaking these words. And then shall be with child implies future tense. What? The Hebrew prophet Isaiah doesn't say anything about future tense. It says hara. Hara is past tense, past present. She already is pregnant. The woman who is pregnant, meaning this birth is going to happen now, soon, quickly, within the next 9 months or so. Okay, within the next year for sure. So it's something that is happening imminently, which matches the context of Isaiah 7, which the kingdom of Judah is in dire straits. Their situation is terrible. It's looking catastrophic. They're about to face extermination. And the God of Israel needs to, will sends his prophet Isaiah to give them reassurance, to trust in him. He will bring about an amazing deliverance. He will do something amazing and will give them a sign through this. And the sign will be that this woman, this young woman who is with child right now, okay, it's, will be the conduit by which the blessing will come. And we see here how the King James Bible, unfortunately, tries to change the text and try to make the reader understand, get the completely wrong message and idea, right? Because they dare tamper with the words of the God of Israel and try to make it seem like it's some kind of future distant prophecy of some unknown young woman or virgin, God forbid. And indeed, that is not the case, right? And then the next thing that they do is they shall call his name Emmanuel. Look at this, the King James Bible and pretty much every other translation over here. This is insane. They, everywhere you look, they shall call his name Emmanuel. Where in the world? Let's go back. Where does it say here in the Hebrew text? It says vekarat, and she will call, not vekaru. That will. It doesn't have anything to do with plural over here. This is astonishing. This is shocking. And of course, they have no answer. And it's really, really sad how people are being misled and tricked and fooled by these, translations that just completely mislead everyone and cause all kinds of chaos. It's terrible. That's why it's so important to learn the Hebrew original, study in the Hebrew original, and worst case, if you need to rely on a translation, then look for translations that are based, and that try to do their best to keep to the original intent, the original message, and faithful to the original Hebrew. Otherwise, you get Matthew 1:21 through 23 over here with all kinds of different translations. I don't know how a Christian can keep up. This is terrible. A virgin shall be with child. No, the young woman, okay, who is with a child or who has conceived will give birth to a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. The mother is to call the name of the son Emmanuel. This is a directive from the God of Israel. The prophet is telling us that the mother is to call the child Emmanuel. Okay, not they. I don't know who they is. Who knows what this they is? No, the mother. All right. And now proof, a lot of people will say, well, how do you know that Hara, that this, that she is pregnant or has conceived? How do you know that that's actually speaking in the past present tense and not in some kind of distant future? Well, Hebrew basics, but if you want, uh, you know, some proof text, yeah, let's go look at it. We just read it actually, the weekly portion, Lech Lecha, and Genesis Bereshit, chapter 16, and where we have actually very, very similar language being used when talking about Hagar. Hagar was the maidservant of Sarai, and Avram at the time. And they uh, were promised an inheritance, and Sarai gives Hagar to Abram as a wife, and she became pregnant, right? And the verse confirms this, right? ויבוא אל הגר ותהר ותרא כי הרתה ותקל גבירתה בעיניה, that Hagar had conceived and she saw that she was pregnant, and her mistress became unimportant in her eyes. So Hagar became rebellious, arrogant, and she thought that she would now take over as the main wife here. She would be the beloved one, the favorite one of Abram, and she became very arrogant and haughty in her own eyes. But the main thing here, right? She had conceived already. She was already pregnant. And now let's fast forward to verse. Let's look at this verse over here. Look at this, verse 11, 16:11. Vayomer la malach Adonai, and the angel of the Lord said to her, Inach hara, behold, right? You have conceived, veyoladit ben. Same language. Hara, veyoladit ben. Extremely, I mean, the same words, right? And how we know that she had already conceived. She has conceived. This is not some kind of future prophecy over here, some kind of thing hundreds of years later. No, this was immediate. This was within the immediate context of their lifetime. She was to return home, submit herself back to Sarai and Avram, and pretty much she was going to give birth within that year to Ishmael, her son, right? And she was to call Vekarat, right? Vekarat Shmo Ishmael. And you will call his name Ishmael. So you will call this child that you're about to give birth to Ishmael. Same language of Isaiah 7:14. Ine ha'alma hara ve'yoladet ben ve'karat shmo Immanuel. You see that? Ve'karat shmo. Same language, same words. Here, Isaiah 7:14 commands the mother of the child to call his name Emmanuel, just like Hagar is commanded by the angel of the Lord to call the child who she is pregnant with, to call him Ishmael. And indeed, the child was known as Ishmael. Ishmael. Okay? So similarly, the child from this young woman will be also called Immanuel by the mother. And it's someone who is known and someone who must have then given birth within the time frame of Isaiah's lifetime and King Ahaz and the people of Judah who were being addressed at that time, facing imminent threat and danger with which they needed from which they needed deliverance. Okay, another example we can find in Shoftim, in the book of Judges, chapter 13, with the story of Samson, right? Shimshon Agibor. So we see a very similar situation over here. Chapter 13, all right? Shoftim, chapter 13, Judges, chapter 13, look at verse 5. Iinach hara veyoladet et ben. Same words. Ki inach hara veyoladet ben. So it's the same words. Ki inach hara. And here, behold, you are with child. You are pregnant. Veyolad ben. And you will give birth to a child, to a son. And then gives them instructions on what to do with this child. And indeed, we see from the context of the passage, right, that Shimshon Agibor, Shimshon, Samson, was born within that year, right? He was contemporary. He wasn't born decades later, hundreds of years later, nothing of that sort. He was contemporary. He was born at that time within a year. Just like Hagar was born, had a child. She was pregnant, and she gave birth to Ishmael. And we see from the next chapter how that all came about. But again, it was within that year, within their time. It was contemporary, folks. It wasn't something that was hundreds of years later. So we see here from Tanakh, from the prophets, Isaiah chapter 7:14, all right, supported by Bereshit, Genesis chapter 16, verse 11, and the book of Judges, Shoftim 13, verse 5. Same language, same structure, same idea. It's all communicating the same language. It is a young woman. The young woman is giving birth, who is pregnant. She is already pregnant. It is something contemporary. That is this, part of the sign. As far as what the sign is, actually, you got to look at Isaiah 7:15 and 16. It's related to the child. Who is this child? And that will be discussed in a little more detail in a later video. But if you want to understand, you have to look at the Hebrew and you have to ask yourself, why in the world did Matthew 1, verses 22 and 23, especially verse 23, make such terrible mis representation of what the prophet Isaiah actually said, changing, making claims that it was a virgin instead of ha'alma, the young woman. Why does the prophet then try to why does the Gospel of Matthew then try to change it into a future tense, that she will give birth? I mean, she will be pregnant, she will conceive, she will be with child. No, it says that according to the prophet Isaiah, he's telling King Ahaz that the young woman is with child. She has already become pregnant. Hence, the child will be born in their days, in their time, which is precisely the sign that they needed, because they were about to be invaded by the two kingdoms who were about to completely annihilate them. Therefore, none of this makes sense. And then they shall call his name Emmanuel? No, the mother is to call the child's name Emmanuel. As we see, Hagar's child Ishmael was actually she was commanded to call the child Ishmael, and we see that indeed a chapter later, the next chapter, her child was actually called Ishmael, exactly as commanded. Same thing with Isaiah 7:14. The child is to be called Emmanuel by the mother. And we see in chapter 8, if you go to chapter 8, we already see who this child Emmanuel is. Look at verse 8:3, 8:8 and 9, and then look at 8:18, how the prophet confirms that the children of the prophet Isaiah were given to him as signs and omens for the children of Israel. Right? So there's your answer. Hopefully that was helpful. And next time that missionaries try to come and try to present Isaiah 7:14 as some kind of proof text of a virgin birth, show Matthew 1:23 and how they completely butcher the Hebrew text, try to change completely the meaning of the text in order to push a narrative that just isn't there. All right. Number one, Yeshu, Jesus, could not have fulfilled anything in Isaiah 7:14 because number one, Isaiah 7:14 had nothing to do with a future prophecy. It was an immediate contemporary prophecy, a word to the King Ahaz, the kingdom of Judah at the time, who was about to be destroyed, and they needed to hear the word of the prophet and experience the deliverance from the God of Israel at their time, during their time. It needed to take place within the next couple of years. All right. So that's exactly what happened. As opposed to needing some kind of savior 500, 600, 700 years later, which makes zero sense. Also, there's nothing over here of a virgin. Betula is the Hebrew word for virgin. Alma it just means a young woman. So no indication of any virgin birth whatsoever from the Hebrew text. And also, lastly, no, they shall call. There is no thing as they shall call them. It's the mother will call the child Immanuel, and nowhere in the New Testament is Yeshu, Jesus, called Emmanuel. He was known by another name, and we are told explicitly that the angel told Joseph apparently to call him by a totally different name for a different reason. Has nothing to do with Emmanuel. Uh, and therefore he could not be fulfillment of Isaiah 7:14. That's it. Case closed. All right, everybody. Follow us for more. We have more videos coming following up on this topic and explaining it more in more detail, especially Isaiah chapter 8, to show you how it all ties together. Until then, have an amazing week, and thank you again for watching.